Excellent. You now have some beautiful red coated bullets, and hopefully they are actually the right size as well. So first off, we need to do some brass prep. If you've already been reloading for a while, you know how that works. It works the same. So clean your brass using the Lee tumble, or not the Lee, it's a Harbor Freight rock tumbler or whatever you have to clean your brass. Clean it, get that ready, and then we're going to resize it right now. And as we resize, I also like to prime. So if you have the Lee decapper die, then you've already decapped it before you cleaned it. Otherwise, it's probably clean, but there's still a spent primer in it, and the die in here, the full-length resizer die, does include a decapper pin as well, so it will decap for you if you haven't done that already. So you put it in, and you do that. Once it's in there, let me grab this. You'll need to get a primer, and unfortunately this camera angle doesn't show the far side of the ram, but this little guy is in there. This thing holds a primer just like that. You want the cup to be facing up. So once it's in place, what happens is when you lower the die, it just flips into place, and then you can use that ram to seat the primer, and there you have it. So I'll show that to you one more time, but that's sizing and priming all done in one step. So you start off by putting a primer in the little holder. Brass goes in the shell holder, size it, and prime it. And there you have it. So pretty easy. Size and prime as many casings as you want to do, and that's it. I actually usually consider this part of case prep, so I mostly have I have a big old container of ready to load, like sized and primed 9mm casings at all times. You don't have to do it that way, but it's nice for me because I can reload ammo a lot faster when I have that stuff ready. So this is where we depart slightly from the standard loading procedures. We need to expand the case mouth a bit so that our bullets will seat easily. Because if you force an oversized lead bullet into a case mouth that isn't really big enough, you're going to push it in crooked at best, and more likely you're going to shave off some of the lead or otherwise deform the bullet, and that's bad news. It's basically going to make an undersized bullet. So don't be afraid to bell the case mouth enough with this Lee powder through expander die to make you comfortable, and more than you probably would for a jacketed bullet. So it needs to be belled enough that the bullet can seat in it pretty easily without getting shaved as it goes in. Now a little bit of fun fact. This die comes with a stock, I'm going to show it on camera actually, comes with a stock what's called an expander plug, which is kind of the key part of the die. So you unscrew this piece on the top, you make a really loud noise by dropping it, and then if you just kind of dump it out, you'll see this is the expander plug. What this does is it forces the mouth of the case over it, so it makes it a little wider. Pretty straightforward. So this one is actually the stock 9mm Luger expander plug that came with the die. Some people can get these to work. If you don't, or if you don't do this right, basically, you're going to be squishing your bullet down when you seat it, and then it's undersized again, and you're going to get leading. I was troubleshooting that for 3 months before I figured out that was finally what was causing me all my problems. So this might work for you. I've heard of people having this work. If you're one of those people, for example, who after powder coating your bullet was exactly the right size and you didn't need to size it, you know, the gods of reloading smile upon you, and I would try this first. The good news is, if it doesn't work, this die, made by Lee as well, is for kind of a random obsolete cartridge called 38 Smith & Wesson, and it is the ideal size to bell your case neck for use with a cast oversized bullet for 9mm. So I ordered this directly from Lee. I think it was $6. And to replace the stock die, or the stock expander plug in the die, you literally just drop this one in instead. Screw this guy back into place, and then readjust how high you've seated the die in your press to however high you want it, or however high you need it, and then use it just like normal. So here's the operation of expanding the case neck for me. It doesn't make a hugely noticeable change, but if you're looking for it, you can see that it's a little bit wider. Oops, sorry about that. So one last note. Yeah, so you're going to have to experiment with your die height again to get things to seat correctly. This plug protrudes further down into the case neck than the stock 9mm plug. What you're aiming for is enough neck expansion to seat the bullet without a lot of undue pressure required to get it in. But also you don't want it so wide that there's not any neck tension on the case neck, like helping to hold the seated bullet into place. So you'll have to do a little bit of experimentation, but once you find that happy medium, you just leave it there and you're good, you're dialed in. Okay, so next we need to hit those cases up with some powder. We're probably going to take a closer look at load development in a future video, but I find that 4.0 grains of W231 or HP38 gives me my best accuracy. Now, I recommend for you starting with the starting loads in your published load data. You know, that official published load data that you're definitely using instead of taking advice from a random internet stranger about how much explosive powder to put into a tiny brass cylinder that ignites a couple of feet away from your face. Right? Anyway, if you've never used the Lee powder measure before, it's really simple. I like to keep a little bowl under it here so I can test. This little guy here, if you rotate it one way, it makes more room inside the cylinder. If you rotate it the other way, it makes less room. So that's how you increase or decrease your charge weight. Depending on how well your powder meters, it will hold its charge weight very consistently. It does a good job. With W231, for example, and this is bullseye in here right now, it works really well. So once you do have it measured, or once you have weighed your charges and gotten it where you want it, you literally just stick your brass casing up here and then run the handle down and back up. And as you can see, we now have a charge in that case. Be careful. I don't think this one will double charge, but some powders that are really dense or like they don't take very much space up, you can double charge your casing, which is a really good way to blow up your gun and lose fingers. So don't do that. Pay very close attention to make sure that you're only doing one charge of powder per casing. Next, you need to seat your bullets. So I haven't found that overall length here is like super crucial. Great, but I haven't done extensive testing to see if just how much it affects accuracy. It's definitely more of a big deal in rifles than it is in pistols. Just know that the shorter you seat the bullet, the less space there is in your case, and therefore you're going to have higher pressure for the same charge weight of powder. So here's how you seat it. Just set the bullets on top. I have the seater die here. There's a little screw at the top of the seater die that adjusts what length you're seating to. That's it, you push it in. So I seat these to an overall length of 1.135 inches. You're welcome to experiment and find what works best for you. But seating is pretty easy. If you're feeling extra fancy or you're not really confident that your bullets are going in straight, you can seat it and then give it a little twist in the shell holder and seat it again. Sometimes I do that when I'm feeling paranoid. I don't know that it makes any difference, but it sure makes me feel better. So officially, the last step is to do a taper crimp using this Lee factory crimp die. Technically, we're not actually crimping per se. We're just trying to remove some of the case mouth belling that we had to do, or that we had to put in there to get the bullet to seat nicely. So if you overdo it on your crimp, you're just swaging your bullet down again. You're squishing it down to a smaller diameter. You're going to get leading. So you really want to give it about the minimum amount of crimp that you can get away with that makes you feel secure about how well your bullet is being held in place by the case walls. So if you're looking at the bullet head on like this, if you can see a gap between the bullet and the brass casing, it needs some crimp. It needs more crimp. If you can't, you might be okay. And then generally a good way to test your neck tension is just pushing on it. If you can't get it to budge, and especially like you don't really need to like push on it super crazy hard or anything, but it should be pretty obvious if it's too loose because it'll just push right down into there, and that's bad. You don't want that. So, fun fact about the Lee factory crimp die, it's the worst. So Lee thought it was going to be this great idea to add this little carbide ring. I don't know if you can see it or not. Right at the mouth of this thing, there's a little carbide ring. That is like a kind of a backup sizer that it makes sure that your rounds will definitely chamber. It does that by squishing the casing down to the diameter of that ring, which, what do you know, is 0.355. Weird. So we're not loading 0.355 bullets, so I have renamed this backup sizing ring to the cast bullet ruining ring. It will pretty much invariably swage your bullet down to smaller than you want it. So there's a couple of solutions here. Number 1, if you are more patient than me and you happen to have diamond valve grinding compound, you can use a spent casing and lap out the inner diameter of this stupid ring so it's no longer contacting your oversized bullet and casing when you pass through it. I've heard that regular silicone carbide valve grinding compound is somewhere in between too slow and completely ineffective at lapping carbide like this, so you can try that if you want, but your mileage may vary. If you're as frustrated with the addition of this useless ring as I am, you can literally just punch it out and throw it away. So a 9/32 of an inch nut driver is just the right size to stick down the top of the die and hammer out the carbide ring. If you're a smooth operator or if your bullets aren't really all that big, you might be able to skip this die entirely. So remember when I told you don't want the 3 die set, you want the 4 die set? The 3 die set is these 3 dies. And the seating die does have a built-in crimp operation in it. I'm not going to be able to really show it to you, so I don't know why I pulled this out, but depending on how low you seat the die past the nut, it will crimp it. So I backed the die all the way back out and then just set the seating plug down. So I'm getting the overall length I want, but the crimping part of that seating die isn't touching anything. It's not doing anything at all. And I like to apply my crimp separately. You can probably get away with the 3 die set if you're careful. So I apologize if you bought the 4 die and you couldn't really afford it and now you can't buy food for your family. That really sucks. I apologize for that. Anyway though, I think you can skip this die entirely. So I've done a test recently where I just tried to get the belling just right so that I could seat it without swaging, but it didn't need any crimp. And I think I found it. It worked just fine. I think I have them checking all the boxes. I have enough neck tension, it's not swaging anything, it seats pretty easily, and it chambers reliably without crimping. I do want to punch out the carbide ring on this because I think it would be a little bit more consistent, but I haven't been able to get mine out. It's stuck in there really good, so I don't know. In the future, if I can get it out, maybe I'll make a video on how I did it. Your 4th option would be to buy an entirely separate die. Lee makes a taper crimp die that's not a factory crimp. Factory crimp designates specifically that it has that stupid carbide ring. So I've heard of people having good success with the Lee regular factory crimp die. I haven't tried it. Anyway though, I don't use this die anymore for the time being until I can punch out that carbide ring. So these bullets are done as far as I'm concerned. Congratulations! You now have some hand loads with home cast bullets and you made them yourself, you beautiful little man or woman. Before we shoot them, we have to do a couple of last safety tests, which I'm going to show you right now, okay? So don't worry. So this is called the plunk test. You take your barrel out of your gun, and you just drop a few rounds out of the batch that you made into the chamber. You spot check them, basically. So just like that. They should easily chamber. So yeah, so like you want to hear this signature plunk noise. That's why it's called the plunk test. I'm going to hold this up to my lav mic so that you can maybe hear the plunk a little better. One sec. Here we go. I don't know if it caught that or not. We'll find out in editing. Anyways, that's the sound of the case mouth contacting the throat of the gun. So if your round is hanging up, or if it doesn't go in there smoothly, or it doesn't make it all the way down, it's too big. So you're probably going to need to crimp it a little bit more, or maybe expand it a little bit less. But it should go in really easily and smoothly. So after they pass the plunk test, I also like to make sure that they're chambering and feeding well. You can do this at the range if you're kind of skittish, or you could make up some dummy rounds with no powder or primer to test it if you want. But here's how you do it. So you'll need a magazine with, I don't know, I think I put 7 or 8 bullets in here that I just made, and your gun pointed in a safe direction, obviously. Keep your finger off of the trigger, obviously. And if you have a safety, which I don't, maybe engage the catch. Just an idea. Anyway though, you want to check that it is chambering smoothly and that it is ejecting smoothly. So the slide should go all the way forwards really easily. If it gets stuck or hangs up, you might need to crimp a little bit more. Mine seem to be working great, so these are ready to take to the range. Alright guys, we did it. We're at the range, and it is time to try out these bullets. Boy, that was exhilarating. Let's wrap things up. First of all, look at your target. Now back to mine. Now back to your target. Now back to mine. Sadly, your target's not mine, but it could look like mine if you did some load development and figured out which powder charge your gun liked the best. So, we've fired your rounds. Hopefully they worked. Hopefully you still have all of your fingers. And now it's time to check your barrel and see if you got leading or not. So, clean your barrel the normal way you normally would. And then look inside of it, and if there's still junk in there that's stuck to the barrel, it's probably lead. If your barrel's clean, congratulations, you're in good shape. Do some load development. We'll cover that in a future video. If you do have leading, take a note of where it is, because that gives us clues on what's causing it. But either way, next episode we're going to talk about how to get it out of your barrel, and how to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe if you want, or don't. I respect your ability to choose for yourself.